YouTube land, it is me, Justin King again with another video. This time I am doing one that I've been wanting to do for a while. I saved it months ago, but for whatever reason I just had all those other things I've been uploading instead that I thought maybe was more important, or I was ready to do it. But now I'm finally ready for this, so I'm excited to actually get it out there. This is going to be I don't know if you guys seen this, but you need to watch this sort of video. And this is going back into being black and goth. We're going backwards a bit into our roots of punk, which goth, as most of you know, started from. This is going to be exploring some people that were connected to the punk scene that were in fact black, and have people discuss about how there wasn't a lot of visible representation of us back in the day, and unfortunately still now. It's only gotten slightly better in both the punk and the goth scene, since goth came from punk, and describes a little bit about these experiences that I've shared in a previous video about why I feel being black in America, or black in a country that is very anti-black, if you're not in America, because America is not the only place that has anti-blackness. Unfortunately, it's a global phenomenon. But if you're living in a place like that, why you can often feel or have valid reasons in expressing that just being live in a state, in a country, in a place like this that is anti what you were born with, that you cannot change, is being punk, is being counterculture, is being subversive in itself. And why taking in subversive and counterculture communities, ideals, etc. has more power and more meaning for us, since our everyday is being against the grain, being turned away, being rejected, being thought of as something different just for who we were born with, and why that matters, and why that's another layered, very important, solid foundation of getting into goth and punk or post-punk. It was created by Because Facts, which, going into deeper, is a subsection of the bigger brand called AJ+. According to the YouTube, AJ+ is a global news community for the connected generation. We highlight human struggle and achievements, empower impoverished voices, and challenge the status quo. So they do a lot of documentary stuff, kind of like Vice, but I believe it's done by a person of color. It says that that's the maintainer on Facebook, so I'm going to assume that they are. And so on their Because Facts section, the video that they did is called Very Black History of Punk. It's about an 11-minute video where they have a few people that they've interviewed, taken some old shots, some old music, and instead of going all of it with you, highlights of it so you can watch the whole video on your own, and this isn't a longer video. So start out with a banger in the intro where we have two people in a band that introduce themselves, and just that statement of being black is being punk, and having that in your face is just a jolt for me. It's just like, yes, yes, give me more.
When you're black, you're punk rock all the time.
And that is the sound of punk. Short, fast riffs, lyrics pushing back against the mainstream mundane, the original don't give a attitude, and a no rules allowed genre for self-identifying misfits that emerged at a time where music was becoming maybe a little too clean. But punks, or at least as I saw it growing up, rarely looked like anything other than these guys. Hey guys, I'm Sana, this is AJ+, and today we're going to explore the very black history and present of punk music.
And from there we move on. And we actually start off with a huge interview and portions about the band Def. And I'm sure most of you guys know who Def is. They are deemed as one of the very first punk bands, period, black or white. and they were a trio, as they mentioned in the video that I'm going to show you clips of. And it's really interesting to hear their perspective and point of view on what they wanted and where they're coming from and all of that.
First, I want to talk about Death, the guys who helped pioneer punk without even trying or knowing. Death was the three Hackney brothers from Detroit. Their music is what's been called proto-punk. Punk before we knew punk was punk.
Always trying to be slick when they tell us that I'm responsible for sending young men tonight.
We felt natural doing it while we were in our own quarters, but playing it out means that you had to answer so many questions.
Yeah, we totally spoke to Death. Now, the Hackney brothers did start off by playing like R&B. In fact, their band was originally called Rock Fire Funk Express. But by 1973, they started playing rock and roll.
But we were just playing hard driving rock and roll, man. We were just really trying to be like the groups of the day that we love, like the MC5 and Alice Cooper and all those great rock and roll bands of the 70s. We were really, just kind of, springboarding off of the sound that they was laying down. But we were just doing it harder, faster, and louder.
Just didn't get the distribution that they needed, with some record labels worried about how to market their name and their sound. And so Death kind of disbanded, but the brothers...
And one of the important things that they do discuss is, for Black people, the difference of doing and being alternative at home and doing and being alternative outside. Now, yes, if you are someone watching or you know somebody that is white and you think, well, all of us have to deal with that, they're talking about a different sort of lack of acceptance than white. Because a lot of times our culture, our media, the people in charge have pushed it that white is the default. Think about Band-Aids. What is the color of nude underwear? And all of that. Examples of how white is already not thought of as, it's not racist, that's just how it is. That's just what the default is, which is incorrect, but unfortunately that's what many people have been grown up to naturally think. Something like that, a microaggression, is totally normal. And so when you aren't thought of as a monolith and you aren't thought of the representation of who you are, and it doesn't reflect on who you are as a race, as a skin color of a person, yes, you're going to personally be viewed as different, but it's going to be different based on just yourself. When you're a person of color, as they are hinting at and they're discussing, a lot of times when you're in mixed groups of people, because unfortunately there are a lot of us just like myself living in places where you are the only Black person in a sea of white people, potentially maybe mixed, but mostly a sea of white people, you are often thought of, and people that are growing up in kindergarten are raised to think by their elders and by their signals around them that if you see somebody that's not white, they are the representation of who they are as a people. So when you're coming out and playing punk, when you're coming out and dressing goth, when you're coming out and dressing in these things and playing these genres, they're getting looked upon as, do Black people do that? Is that something that Black people are part of? How does that reflect you being Black and doing this? How as a group is that reflecting based on how you are and how you're acting? So if I met someone like you, all Blacks are going to be like that, but why aren't you doing that? Because that's not the roadmap that I've seen for people like you. So it's a really different experience, and it's nice that they touch on that. The other thing is that they mention how other music, which was not only created, how rock was created by Black people, Rosetta Thorpe, as I mentioned in the past, but other Black music that is not in a part of the rock and roll genre was really influential as well. They mentioned how in punk they had huge influence from reggae music. And as you know, that reggae sound and the different rhythms that they have that's different than other genres of music carried over into post-punk as well. And it also carried over into some goth, as some of you in the comments have mentioned. So it's really interesting to bring that up, and it also solidifies for me why I'm doing the whole hip-hop R&B of the 90s, my generation, how some of y'all who are watching have also admitted that for lack of access to the internet back then, and also lack of access to goth rock, and the whole genre of gothic music, if you weren't allowed to listen to all of that, these black genre of music was able to be something that you could consume because it was a part of your culture. It was already a part of the community that you were born into, but it was also the dark side that allowed you to explore and find your way to goth before you were able to get to the genre of music that you liked. So it was really cool that it brings that, and it also for me solidifies that part of why I'm doing my generation's version and what I'm more comfortable and familiar with influencing into the whole goth monolith, well, not monolith, the whole goth being culture too. One of the more interesting things that I liked about this video as well is when they discuss why being black, especially in America, is being punk. I've already discussed, and they discuss as well, how we are often, unfortunately, the monolith example for people of our own kind, to white people and sometimes other races too, unfortunately. But this also takes it in a different direction and goes into the history of us being legally othered, being legally kicked out, being legally not allowed to do so many other things just because of the way we were born. They were mentioning how for us we had to do things underground. For us black people, we had to sneak and hide and just do things subversive because we weren't allowed to. For example, the musicians, as they mentioned, actually play in the majority clubs and concert venues and be able to sell them in the normal places that they had, and that we had to secretly create our own and do our own from the ground up. And that's definitely what post-punk and punk is. And goth definitely has a lot of DIY, do-it-yourself background too.
Important to note, as writer and musician Greg Tate told me, the difference in how white and black musicians in the same genre were marketed and how that had an impact on who got the credit and who got the fame.
The American music business is made up of gatekeepers. On the corporate side, on the radio side, they very much subscribe to the Jim Crow notions of racial separation and segregation, which defined American culture throughout, most of the 20th century. It meant that black artists, historically for most of the 20th century, couldn't make as much money playing their own music, didn't have access to the same audiences, the same opportunities.
Now,
I realized that, not only is rock and roll something that is native to people like myself and to Honeychild, but it's almost like my birthright.
that's Honeychild Coleman and Sasha Jenkins of the punk band trio, the 1865, and yes, their name is referencing exactly what you think it's referencing. The 1865 references America in 1865, when the Emancipation Proclamation brought a lot of promise of change for Black Americans, except the racists had other plans. Honeychild Coleman, Sasha Jenkins, and Shauna Shante, who runs a Black Brown Punk Festival in Oakland, all say that there's nothing more punk than being Black in America.
I'm not saying black people created punk rock, I'm saying we are punk rock without even trying.
The foundations of what people do that creates punk culture, say going on tour, booking your own tour through a underground network, that's what Black musicians had to do because we weren't allowed to play in clubs. When we have been pushed to the margins, but we create in those margins, and that's it doesn't get more punk than that.
I knew that it was my legacy, and I never believed anyone who told me I was trying to be white because I love rock and I love guitars.
But even though they all agree that there's nothing more punk than being Black, they also raise the point of how different the experience is of being either white or black in the punk scene.
When you're black, you're punk rock all the time. You're a target all the time. And I can't change the color of my skin. There is a level of privilege that goes with, I'm gonna put a safety pin through my nose and paint my hair, dye my hair green for 3 years, and then I'm gonna clean up and put on a suit and get a corporate job. We don't really have that luxury.
You also get cred for having punk years. But in my experience working in the corporate world, I can't let everybody know what I do outside of work because it could cost me my job.
And having little and taking from that little and being creative and making your own thing, which, as they mentioned, with things that we had to do because of segregation, because of the rules of saying that we weren't even considered a full person, but we were fractions of a person legally for so many centuries. So I hope you enjoyed my commentary of the video that AJ Plus through Because Facts created. I hope you check out the link below for the full video. I hope the sound bites really inspired you, because I think it's something that all people of color that are alternative, goth, punk, anything watch, because there's a lot of us that have the confidence issue. Are we being tricked into what I mentioned earlier, where we were seen as a monolith of our versions and told that, oh, people that aren't white don't do this, so now you're doing something that we don't know due to ignorance, purposefully through not putting this in history books when it comes to music, when it comes to these sorts of media creations, and leaving us out. Now I'm feeling unconfident because I'm believing what these people are saying and thinking that this is a creation of only white people. Now hopefully you watch this and it gives you less doubt, and we have less of those videos being uploaded of saying that I'm black but I'm different, so isn't that great, isn't that special, and I'm black and I'm different and I'm scared and I don't really feel like it and it's hard and blah blah blah. Yes, it can be, but hopefully you can come from it, from sharing your personal experiences and not feeling like you're so unique and different, because you're not. There's so many of us, and that's the lovely thing. There's so many of us that you're just a part of this wonderful thing together. So before I ramble too much and it stops making sense, this is me, Justin King, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye, YouTube land.